Hey everyone, and welcome back. Before we get into today's story, I just want to ask that if you find value in what I share here, please take a second to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. It helps more than you know. A lot of you have been asking for the full story, not the sanitized version the media ran with, but the real, raw truth of what happened. So here it is. This is the story of how I went from being an invisible housewife to the woman who burned down a political dynasty with nothing but silence and a well-timed speech. This is the story of my revenge. My world used to be the color of beige. A tasteful, expensive, and utterly unremarkable beige. It was the color of the walls in our Brookline, Massachusetts home, the color of the cashmere sweaters my mother-in-law, Beatrice, favored, and the color of the bland, predictable future I had accepted for myself. I was Elena Morris, 37 years old, and my most notable accomplishment was being the wife of James Morris, the charismatic city councilman poised to become Boston's next mayor. I wasn't always beige. I remember a version of myself painted in vibrant reds and bold blues. The Elena who graduated top of her class from law school, who argued cases with a fire in her belly, who had a corner office with a view of the Charles River in her 5-year plan. That Elena faded the day I met James. He was a force of nature, charming, driven, with a smile that could disarm a firing squad. He painted a different kind of picture for me, one of a partnership. He was the star, and I would be his anchor, the bedrock of his family, the silent partner in his ascent. He had 2 young children from a previous marriage, Leo and Mia, and he needed stability. He needed me. And I, swept up in the promise of a grand love story, a real family, said yes. I traded my ambitions for his. I packed away my law books and picked up lunchboxes and carpool schedules. I learned to host fundraisers, to smile placidly at his side, to be the perfect, supportive political wife. I believed in the promise. I truly did. The first crack in our perfect beige world wasn't a loud shatter, but a quiet, insidious hairline fracture. It started with his phone. For years, his phone was our phone, a community device left on the kitchen counter. Suddenly, it was an extension of his hand, always angled away from me, screen down. Then came the whispers. He'd take calls in the pantry or step out onto the porch, his voice a low, urgent murmur. When I'd walk in, he'd snap the phone shut with a practiced, easy smile. Campaign business, darling, you know how it is. Strategy sessions. The late nights became later. The scent of his day, stale coffee, and city air was replaced by a faint, sweet perfume I didn't recognize. It was floral and young, a scent I would never wear. When I asked, he'd laugh it off. Beatrice's new fragrance, probably. She practically bathes in it. He'd kiss my forehead, a dismissive, placating gesture that felt more like a pat on the head for a loyal dog than a kiss for a wife. Even the children, Leo and Mia, began to change. Once I had been their confidant, the one they came to with scraped knees and broken hearts. Now, at 16 and 14, they were distant, their conversations with me clipped and perfunctory. They were enamored with their father's rising star. They saw the campaign signs on lawns, heard his name on the news. "Dad's going to be the mayor, Mom," Leo said one evening, barely looking up from his phone. "He's doing really important things." The unspoken addendum hung in the air, unlike you. The true architect of my daily erosion, however, was Beatrice. A woman sculpted from old money and disdain, she saw me as a temporary placeholder, a necessary but unfortunate domestic appliance. At her weekly Sunday dinners, she would deliver her barbs with the precision of a surgeon. "Elena, dear, it's wonderful that you found such a purpose in managing the household. Some women simply aren't cut out for the pressures of a real career." Or, while gesturing at my simple dress, "So practical. It's a gift, really, to have no need to impress anyone." Each comment was a small, sharp pebble dropped into my shoe, a constant reminder of my perceived inadequacy. I was just a housewife, a service provider for the great James Morris and his legacy. The final, devastating blow came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was looking for a digital copy of Leo's birth certificate on the shared family iMac for a school trip application. James had used it earlier and, in his haste, had left his email open. I wasn't snooping. I was just trying to close the window when a subject line caught my eye: post-election transition plan. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. It was a thread between James, his campaign manager, and Beatrice. And someone named Tessa. I clicked. My world didn't just crack, it atomized. The emails laid it all out in cold, corporate language. Tessa was Tessa Reynolds, a 24-year-old PR intern on his campaign. The affair had been going on for 6 months. Beatrice not only knew, she was actively encouraging it. She called Tessa a much more suitable match for a man of James's station. They weren't just cheating. They were strategizing. The plan was chillingly simple. I would continue to play the role of the devoted wife through the election to avoid any scandal that could derail his mayoral bid. The moment he won, James would file for a quiet, no-fault divorce. The narrative they had crafted was that we had amicably grown apart. 6 months later, once the dust had settled, he would announce his engagement to Tessa in a grand, public spectacle. A flashy political wedding that would cement his image as a man of the future, a vibrant leader with an equally vibrant young wife. I wasn't a person in their plan. I was a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied up and discarded. I scrolled down, my vision blurring with tears, until I found an email from James to his mother. He was complaining about my recent moodiness. "She's getting suspicious," he wrote. "I don't know why she can't just be content. Her life is perfect. All she has to do is run the house and look pretty. It's not a difficult job. But God, she's become such a boring little housemaid. A boring little housemaid." The words echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of the room. The beige walls seemed to close in, suffocating me. For 15 years, I had poured every ounce of my being into this family, this man, this life. I had silenced my own ambitions, my own voice, so that his could be heard. And this was my reward, to be called a housemaid and slated for quiet disposal like an old sofa. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The woman who believed in the promise of love and family died. The tears stopped. The grief receded, replaced by something cold, hard, and terrifyingly clear. They thought I was invisible. They thought I was silent. Fine, I would be silent. I would be a ghost in my own home. And a ghost, I decided, can haunt you in ways you never see coming. The quiet betrayal was over. The silent setup was about to begin. The next morning, I woke up and the world was in high definition. The subtle condescension in James's voice, the pitying glances from Beatrice, the way my own children looked through me, it was all sharp and clear, no longer dulled by the fog of my love and loyalty. I put on my mask. I was Elena Morris, the quiet, defeated wife. I made James his coffee, just how he liked it. I smiled when he kissed me goodbye, a hollow gesture that no longer reached his eyes. "Have a great day, darling, work hard." My voice was steady, calm, the voice of the woman he thought I was. Inside, a silent, furious engine had roared to life. He was looking at a perfectly constructed facade, and he saw exactly what he wanted to see, a woman who had given up. My first act was to call a number I'd found in an old legal directory. Frank Miller, private investigator. His office was a small, dusty room over a pawn shop in a less glamorous part of Boston. He was a man in his late 50s with tired eyes that had seen every flavor of human betrayal. He didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. He just listened, his pen scratching against a notepad. "What do you want, Mrs. Morris?" he asked when I finished. "Everything," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I want to know where he goes, who he sees. I want photographic evidence. I want audio. But most importantly, I want a complete forensic accounting of his campaign finances and his personal accounts. I have a feeling they've gotten tangled." Frank raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order, expensive." I slid a cashier's check across the desk, a check drawn from an old personal account I'd kept from my lawyering days, an account James knew nothing about. It was my what-if fund, and this was the ultimate what-if. "This is the retainer. I want you to be my shadow, Frank, and I want you to be his." While Frank got to work, I became a spy in my own home. I was a phantom, moving through the rooms where my life had been built, now cataloging them as a crime scene. The nights became my domain. After James fell into the deep, untroubled sleep of the morally bankrupt, I would slip out of bed and descend to his study. Armed with a list of passwords I had observed him using over the years, his college sports team, his father's birthday, the name of his first boat, I began to dig. The financial records were a goldmine. Campaign funds donated by unions, by small business owners, by ordinary citizens who believed in his vision for the city, were being funneled into a secret account. From there, the money flowed out. A down payment on a luxury condo in the Seaport district, a condo I now knew was for Tessa. A charge from Cartier for a campaign gift that matched the description of a bracelet Tessa was wearing in a photo on her Instagram. 5-star hotel stays in New York City, listed as donor outreach trips. Private jet rentals for weekend getaways to Nantucket, categorized as political strategy retreats. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was defrauding the very people he promised to serve. I downloaded everything onto an encrypted hard drive, every statement, every receipt. Getting the audio was trickier. Frank had given me a recording device no bigger than a sugar cube. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for my moment. It came one morning when he was in the shower. His briefcase was on the bed, open. With trembling hands, I activated the device and slipped it into the lining of an inner pocket. For the rest of the day, I was sick with anxiety, convinced he would find it. But he didn't. He was too arrogant, too sure of his own cleverness. He couldn't imagine his boring little housemaid capable of such espionage. That night after he was asleep, I retrieved the device. I sat in the dark of my walk-in closet, my laptop on my knees, and put on my headphones. I listened to hours of his day, the drone of meetings, the fake laughter with donors. And then I heard it, his voice speaking to Tessa. "Just a few more months, babe. Once I'm in office, Elena will be a distant memory. We'll handle the divorce quietly. She won't fight it. She doesn't have it in her." Then Tessa's voice, sharp and dismissive. "Are you sure she seems clingy?" And then the sound that broke the last remaining piece of my heart. James's laugh, a deep, cruel, genuine laugh. "Clingy? God, no, she's a boring housemaid, Tess. She knows her place. She'll be sad for a bit, then she'll go back to her book club and her gardening and be perfectly content. She doesn't have the spine for a fight." I saved the file. My hands were perfectly steady. There were no more tears left to cry. My final move was the boldest. I needed to get inside Tessa's head, to understand her ambition, her dreams, the ones she was building on the wreckage of mine. I created a fake identity online. I became Chloe Astor, a 25-year-old aspiring event planner from a wealthy family in Connecticut. Chloe was bright-eyed, ambitious, and utterly obsessed with the James Morris campaign. Her Instagram was a curated fiction of brunches at exclusive clubs, weekends in the Hamptons, and fawning posts about political power couples. I found Tessa on Instagram and slid into her DMs. "OMG, Tessa, your work on the Morris campaign is legendary. As someone who wants to get into political events, you are my absolute idol. Any advice you could share would be a dream come true." It was sickeningly easy. Tessa, hungry for validation and worship, took the bait immediately. We started messaging. Chloe was the adoring younger sister she never had. I listened to her complain about the pressures of the campaign, about how hard it was to stay in the shadows. And then she started talking about the future. Her future. "James and I are already planning the wedding," she typed one night. "It has to be iconic. We're thinking the Boston Public Library. So classic, so powerful. I want a Vera Wang gown, of course. We have to project strength and style." This isn't just a wedding, it's a coronation. She sent me pictures of rings, venues, dresses. She told me about the engagement party they were planning, a massive, exclusive affair at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, designed to be the unofficial launch of their future reign. "I just want everyone to see that a modern woman doesn't have to settle," she wrote to her new best friend, Chloe. "She can have the career, the power, and the man. She just has to know her worth and take it." I stared at the message on my screen, a cold smile touching my lips. "Oh, you have no idea what a modern woman is capable of," I thought. "But you're about to find out. I had the emails. I had the financial records. I had the audio. And now, thanks to Tessa, I had the perfect stage for my final act. James and Beatrice had planned a quiet disposal. Tessa was planning a coronation, but I was planning a bombshell. The night of the engagement party was electric with the scent of money, power, and expensive perfume. The ballroom at the Fairmont Copley Plaza was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. Boston's political and social elite were all there, schmoozing and networking, their laughter echoing off the crystal chandeliers. I had been invited, of course. A text from James earlier in the day. "Beatrice insists you come. For appearances. Just stay in the background, please. Don't make it awkward." I didn't intend to make it awkward. I intended to make it unforgettable. I arrived alone. I had chosen my armor carefully, a simple, high-necked navy blue dress that I'd owned for years. My hair was pulled back in a simple chignon, my makeup minimal. I was a study in understated elegance, designed to be overlooked. I was the ghost at the feast, and it worked. People's eyes slid right past me. A few offered tight, pitying smiles before turning back to more important conversations. I saw Beatrice holding court, resplendent in a Chanel suit, basking in the glow of her son's imminent victory. She caught my eye and gave me a look of pure, triumphant disdain. James and Tessa stood at the center of the room, a radiant, victorious couple. He in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, the charming mayoral candidate. She in a glittering silver dress, her hand possessively on his arm, a massive diamond. The one she'd shown Chloe on her finger. They looked like a magazine cover. I took a glass of water from a passing waiter and found a quiet spot near the back, watching, waiting. The evening wore on with speeches from campaign donors and city officials, each one praising James's integrity, his vision, his commitment to family values. The irony was so thick it was almost comical. Finally, Tessa stepped up to the microphone, beaming. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredible moment," she began, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. When I met James, I saw a man of incredible strength and vision. And I believe that behind every great man is a woman who isn't afraid to be his equal, to stand beside him, not behind him. She paused, her eyes sweeping the room, and for a moment they landed on me. A flicker of condescending pity crossed her face. "This is a new era," she continued, her voice rising. "It's an era for modern women who know their worth, who aren't afraid to go after what they want. It's about stepping into your power and building the life you deserve." The crowd erupted in applause. James kissed her, a performative, public display of affection that made my stomach turn. They were magnificent. They were untouchable. They were wrong. As the applause began to die down, I put my water glass down and began to walk toward the stage. I moved with a calm, deliberate slowness that felt otherworldly. A few people noticed, their faces registering confusion. I saw James's eyes widen in alarm. He started to move toward me, his hand outstretched, a frantic whisper of Elena dew on his lips. But it was too late. I was already at the steps. I walked up to the stage, took the microphone gently from a stunned Tessa's hand, and turned to face the crowd. The room was utterly silent. Every eye was on me. The quiet, invisible wife. "Good evening," I said, my voice perfectly calm and clear, amplified throughout the grand ballroom. Tessa's speech was very inspiring. It's so important for a woman to know her worth. I've recently been on my own journey of discovering mine, and I'd like to share a few things I've learned. I saw James's face pale. Beatrice looked like she had been turned to stone. "First, I've learned about timelines," I said, my eyes scanning the crowd of reporters I knew were present, tipped off an hour ago by Frank Miller. "For instance, I learned that a 6-month affair can feel like a lifetime. This one started on April 12th, to be exact. I have the hotel receipts from the first weekend trip to New York, if anyone from the press is interested." A collective gasp went through the room. The reporters were already scribbling, their phones out and recording. "I've also learned a lot about campaign finance," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I learned that you can categorize very personal expenses as political necessities. For example, the stunning Cartier bracelet Tessa is wearing tonight was purchased with funds from a donation made by the Boston Firefighters Union. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to know their contribution went to such a worthy cause. And the down payment on the couple's future love nest, a condo in the seaport, that came from a fund meant for community outreach programs in Dorchester. I have the bank statements." Chaos was beginning to ripple through the crowd. People were whispering, staring, the air thick with scandal. James looked like he was going to be physically ill. "But the most important thing I learned," I said, reaching into my small clutch purse and pulling out my phone, "is how a man truly feels about the woman who gave up her career for him. The woman who raised his children. The woman who has stood by his side for 15 years. I held the phone up to the microphone. A moment of feedback, and then James's voice filled the ballroom, crystal clear and laced with cruel amusement. "A boring housemaid, Tess. She knows her place. She doesn't have the spine for a fight." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound you could feel the weight of it. Every person in that room, every supporter, every donor, every friend had heard it. They had heard the truth behind the charming smile. I let the silence hang for a moment longer, then I brought the microphone back to my lips. I looked directly at James, at his shattered expression, and then at Tessa, whose face was a mask of horror and humiliation. I delivered my final lines, not with anger, but with the cold, hard finality of a judge delivering a verdict. "You didn't just cheat on me," I said, my voice ringing with a power I hadn't felt in years. "You tried to erase me. You and your family conspired to dispose of me like an old piece of furniture. But remember this, James. The wife you called invisible is the one who just made you unforgettable." I placed the microphone carefully back on the lectern, and as the room erupted into an explosion of shouts, camera flashes, and panicked questions, I turned and walked calmly off the stage, through the stunned crowd, and and out of the ballroom, leaving the smoldering ruins of their lives behind me. I didn't look back. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. James's campaign imploded overnight. He was forced to withdraw from the race in disgrace, his name synonymous with fraud and humiliation. The district attorney's office launched a full-scale investigation into his campaign finances. Beatrice went into social exile, her dynasty in tatters. Tessa became a pariah, hounded by the media, her dreams of being a political power player turned to ash. A week later, I wrote an essay. I didn't hold back. I wrote about the slow, quiet erosion of self that can happen in a marriage, about the invisible labor of women, and about the moment I decided to stop being silent. I titled it The Power of the Silent Wife. It went viral. My inbox was flooded with messages from women all over the world who saw themselves in my story. A publisher from New York called. They offered me a book deal. They wanted to hear my voice. The final scene of my old life wasn't in a ballroom or a courtroom. It was here where I am now. Sitting on a quiet stretch of beach on Cape Cod, the late afternoon sun warm on my face. The legal battles are over. The book is written. The noise has finally faded. For a long time, I thought revenge was the goal. I thought seeing James and his world crumble would be my victory. And there was a satisfaction in it, I won't lie. But sitting here, listening to the waves crash and recede, I understand the truth. The victory wasn't their destruction. It was my reconstruction. The smile on my face isn't because I won. It's because I'm free. I'm not James Morris's wife. I'm not a boring housemaid. I'm not invisible. I am Elena. And for the first time in a very long time, that is more than enough. I've finally reclaimed myself. So that's the story. The whole unvarnished truth. Thank you for listening. It means the world to be able to share it on my own terms. If this resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video, subscribe for more, and leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Until next time, be well and know your worth.